This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Hi, this is Joe Rabil. So I'm going to go through the market today. We'll cover the market conditions, but I do want to look at the trend and momentum as well and all the multiple time frames. And one of the things I want to talk about is the potential for what we should be expecting, say, over the next 2 to 4 weeks that could present a really good opportunity if it develops the way it is. It actually could be an opportunity over the next 2 to 4 days. But we'll go through that and we'll talk about that in detail. All right. Now, if you want to learn more about some of these techniques, you can go to rabilstockresearch.com and go to the book tab. Also, you can just click the link in the description. I have that information there, so you can click that to get more information on the book. Also, if you do enjoy this content, please hit the like button and also subscribe. Okay, let's start out with the sentiment, which has jumped up again. We're up we've gone up from 29% up to 33%, more bulls than bears now. Just keep in mind, this is a massive jump from where we were just 2 weeks ago. All right. So I'm leaning towards, so obviously that's a negative. I'd like to see if this starts to work its way up into like the mid 30s, then we've really hit the danger zone. But to me, because it's jumped so much in such a short period of time, I'm definitely referring to this as negative. And it took, the market to break out for us to actually get this more people bullish, right? Now, the overbought, oversold oscillator, RSI 5, has made this move from late March. We were down at 7 on the RSI 5 weekly, and now we're up to about 80. All right, so that's a pretty big, significant move that it's made over the course of several, a couple months. And I think we have to acknowledge the fact that we're in the nosebleed section, right? We're getting up into this resistance area from an overbought standpoint. Now, that does not mean that we have to turn down. Now, that's the thing about overbought and oversold, is that it's sort of theoretical. We could just continue to hang in here while this keeps pushing higher. So don't assume it has to turn down. But what we're looking for is for this to turn down, because if it does and the RSI 20 holds above, then we actually have a legitimate potential opportunity, especially based on what's taking place with the volatility. If you notice what's taking place here, we've gotten the average true range on the weekly to drop down through the moving average. Now, it's going to take, a little bit more work to roll that moving average over and turn this to positive. But the fact is that it's kind of moving in the right direction. The big test, the big tell will be if we go through a pullback or a pause or something like that, we were to consolidate back into support and get this to work its way down below the 50 mark, does this keep dropping? That's the key. I think that's the true key to see if we get a really good opportunity. All right. If we're going to get a really good buying opportunity, I think it's going to take that kind of shape. It's going to have a pause, or it might drop down and then consolidate, might form something like that, some kind of a little zigzag or something like that somewhere in this support zone here, while these moving averages are turning up underneath and providing some support. So I think that's what we should be on the lookout for from a bigger picture standpoint. I'm going to go through everything else here in a second, but let me just run through these. We have the trend is positive on the monthly and the daily, and still neutral on the weekly. And the momentum is now positive on the monthly and the daily, and it's neutral on the weekly. All right. Now, when we look at what's taking place on the daily chart, we actually have to kind of respect the fact that we've already had a couple of sort of like bull flag looking patterns, right? Back to the 18 with low volatility. And you can see the RSI buy setups that took place where we got a drop down below the 50 mark. We're looking for our first one on the weekly since this drop. We haven't had it, right? I mean, we should get one. If this is a legitimate move, like if we're going to get a legitimate move that has upside continuation, I would say we almost have to get an RSI buy. I mean, it's pretty rare that it'll just go up, 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 up. We could go up, but then we're probably going to hit. So in other words, if we don't ever get a buy signal here, then we could carry higher, but then it'll probably hit some kind of a peak, and that'll be the peak for the year. All right, so just kind of be aware of that. I think if we're prepping for something significant, and I like to use the so let's just go back. I know there are probably some people that haven't watched this review in the past, so I just want to show. If we go back to 20, you can see this drop. Let's just do this. You can still see this violent drop, similar to what took place here. And then as we broke to a new high, do you see how we got this little zigzag consolidation while the volatility was dropping, and we set up a couple of RSI buys finally, right? We didn't see it off the low, similar to here. We got the same sort of pattern. But now we should be on the lookout. Now, it doesn't mean it has to happen in a double bottom fashion like this. It could be just one pullback and go. But I'm just saying, like, we get that to develop. I think that's something we want to be on the lookout for, especially if we see the volatility continuing to drop. So that's kind of what I'm on the lookout for. Now, look, that doesn't mean that I'm not looking for buying opportunities in individual stocks. I'm talking about if I were going to buy this, if I'm going to buy this. Okay, and this is obviously going to have an influence on a lot of stocks. So we want to know what this is going to do and where it's going to present a really good opportunity. That's what we want to do this. That's why we do this on Fridays. We want for Friday morning. We want to know where we can get a potential opportunity in this, and that should really improve our opportunities across the board in individual stocks. So want to see that take place. All right, let's switch over to the important chart, looking at the 4 different time frames. We can see that we've still got a pretty good trend in place on the weekly. On the monthly, I did switch this to positive for the trend because the MACD did cross back over. Green DI is back above 25. It's almost about to take back over the green. But the key thing to keep in mind here, green is in control. All right. I know red popped up, right? But it popped right back down. It didn't take over the prior peak here. So this is pretty important. If red crosses above 25, it doesn't mean, and it crosses above green, it doesn't mean that the bears have taken over command, right? It's taken control. It just means that they're trying to, right? But they would have to take over this prior peak to really do that. And that did not happen. So green getting back above 25, getting back above the red, I think means that it's basically back in control, especially considering the last peak in the market was confirmed by a strong ADX peak. All right. So the fact that the MACD is crossing back over, I just feel like I kind of have to call it positive again. Ideally, we'll get some kind of a pullback or consolidation. I don't know that it'll actually show up on that monthly chart, but we really want it to show up on the weekly. Ideally, that's really what we want to take place. Now, I would say if there's a fly in the ointment of this market, it's the fact that green DI has not even been able to get above 25, right? I mean, it's worked its way, but it's got its above the negative DI, the red, but it hasn't gotten above 25. And we've made a pretty substantial move. Now, I know there's a lot of lag, but typically the lag is in the ADX line itself, not necessarily in the green lagging like this. So we've got MACD in a pretty good spot. All right. I mean, I'm putting this in the neutral camp, even though we had a big red reading to the downside and green hasn't really gotten back above 25. But MACD's in a good enough spot to keep this maybe climbing. I think what would be ideal, again, is if we can get some kind of a consolidation and maybe even form, make sure we really would prefer. It doesn't have to be this way because based on the way things have set up, but we want to see green hold above red during any kind of a pullback. I think if it's violent, right, then red's going to pop up here again. And that's going to tell me that this is a little bit more sloppy. It's going to take more time. So, I think we have to be prepared for anything, but that's why I really want to watch the volatility on the pullback. If the volatility is low and staying low, then there's a pretty good chance we're not going to have violent bars to the downside. And then I think this sets up in a decent way. Now, I still think, just based on what's taken place on the daily chart, I think this is the time frame we need to watch the most. And the reason is that it's the time frame that's been tested. It's been holding, right? This 18 is the one in command right now until it breaks. Now, there's another way it could play out. All right. It doesn't necessarily have to break it, but if it were to go, let's say we just go ahead and we go vertical here. If it just goes straight up from here and kind of spikes from here, then I would view this more like a climax pattern. All right. I mean, it would be, to me, a sign of that we should be a little bit more in fear, especially based on what's taking place with the sentiment. But if we don't do that and it just keeps in this sequential wave, do you see how this is more of a sequential wave pattern where it's just sequentially moving higher? It's not getting too far away. If it were to keep going right now, then it would be getting too far away from this line. But if it just comes back to this line, then that could be just another short-term buying opportunity. You want to watch the RSI 5 again and see how this handles that. Now, we've already had 2 pullbacks. Typically, after 2, you sort of expect a more complex correction on the next one. So you got to be careful on the next pullback. I'm just saying, like, if you get a setup that is confirmed by the hourly, I mean, it's possible this could keep going right now. But I would say the likelihood of that happening is probably not as high, simply because we're overbought based on the RSI 5, and we've already gotten a lot of bulls shifting, more and more bulls, less bears. I think we're going to face some form of headwind. So what we want to look for is, do we break this 18-day? If that happens, then there's a pretty high likelihood we're going to work down towards the 18-week and the 18-month, which are pretty close together now. At least not that far apart. There's an area here that I think we could be on the lookout for, a sign of support underneath, where both of those lines could act as support together. All right. So that's kind of that's the update for the week. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.